I'm
I
actually
downloaded
everybody, and welcome back to the Whiskey Lounge. I am your host, Brandon. As you realize that my mic made shit. I've got my friend here with me.
What's happening, everybody?
There
My
you are.
name's Nick. Yeah, you were cutting out, so I couldn't tell whether that was my cue or not. So,
Yeah.
what's happening, everybody? My name is Nick. Here for another conversation.
Wyatt as well.
Yep, I'm back. I'm over a 2 week sickness, but I'm feeling better. My whole family's been out, but here we are again.
And then, of course, we have Trevor.
Hello, hello.
Alrighty,
right.
so let's jump right into it. As I'm sure everyone has heard, there's a complete run on the banks, and America's banking collapsing completely. I'll let you take the lead on this one, Nick.
All right, so everyone knows that what happened back in the 1920s. There was a run on the bank. Banks couldn't pay out their money. Banks couldn't give people their deposits, and led to a Great Depression. Well, there's a run on the within the last week. Actually, I shouldn't say week. The last weekend, we had the second and third largest bank collapse in American history, all in the course of a weekend. And you had the Biden administration come out saying we are not going to be bailing out the banks. We're not going to be doing this. We're not going to be doing that. We're only going to insure the normal $250,000 for the FDIC over the weekend. And then it turned into, well, actually, we are going to be bailing everybody out. We're going to be bailing out over the $250,000. We're going to be looking out for the very rich, very wealthy, and the big businesses, and not really care as much about the little guys, the ones who really needed the FDIC support. They're going after the big guys.
Yeah, I mean, in Silicon Valley, they kind of like you said, they at first were like, yeah, they're not gonna bail anyone out, and now they're bailing everybody out. And I can't remember talk show host that was particularly on about something with it, and he ended up having stock in the bank, or having his money in the bank, like 85% of his money, or maybe it's 85% of the money in the bank was over 250,000. Either way, it's completely ridiculous.
Well, I mean, if you also take a look at Governor Gavin Newsom, he was very enthusiastic about the bailouts, saying that it's going to be helping Californians, it's going to be helping California businesses. Except he failed to mention all of his wineries that he has all of his money going through the Silicon Valley Bank. He wasn't willing to disclose that information for how much money he's going to be getting from all the bailouts. He's making payday. He's getting his money back, so he really doesn't care. He's going to be shouting from the high roofs of heaven saying, hey, everything's great, everything's wonderful. And if you also been paying attention to Silicon Valley, they are now using this as like a jump tool, saying that your money is the safest it's ever going to be with us because the government is going above the $250,000 limit. So it's safer here than anywhere else.
So I don't know if you guys have read into what actually happened. Did you guys know a little bit about the banking for it, the whole collapsing and everything? Because I have a little bit of insight on Silicon Valley specifically.
Go on.
Are you
so?
Okay, go ahead.
This is what actually happened. Okay, so everybody knows that Silicon Valley Bank. Do you know what it's actually provided for in the most sense for it in that valley? It is there for startup businesses, companies, and most of the higher end corporate people and stuff. So basically, what that bank does is they loan a lot of the money out corporate people and stuff. So basically what there's a little bit of a buffer on how banks work. So when they loan out money to people, but they also have to have a percentage where they can make sure that they have a continuous revenue within the bank. You're right, they have stocks. So what this particular bank does, Silicon Valley Bank, they actually buy bonds. So I don't know if you guys know what bonds work with, but bonds work with economy. So they spent about a couple $1 billion on bonds about a couple years ago. at a rate of 1.75%. Now, do you know what the rate is right now for bonds?
I don't know exactly, but I was
dropped
gonna
off
say
significantly.
I was gonna say I know what he's talking about. I saw that on
Yeah.
Timcast that bonds have gone down exponentially.
So the bonds right now are at 4%. And that's like a record of what bonds have been since the Great Depression, as Nick had said. Now, bonds were used during that time, during the war and everything like that. But, you know, people continue that on as a good investment for future uses. Well, that's what this bank actually did, was they used this loan and the bonds that they bought. All of a sudden, they started realizing that they were losing billions of dollars almost every month just off of these bonds from bonds from the Depression and everything, from what we're trying to kind of get into right now. So what happened was, over the weekend, the CEO, what he did was he started selling all these bonds. Now, you know how most companies work, and you know, if you tell a friend, they're like, hey man, don't tell anybody this, but you know, this happened last weekend, it's going to get out. So what happened was it started leaking. So a lot of those companies and a lot of those startup companies, tech companies, everybody like that, they started freaking out and they pulled their money as well. And it's just this particular bank that actually had this happen to them. So what it does is everybody else is starting to freak out. But what we need to actually tell people is all your other local banks are completely fine. See, I bank with like a northeastern bank up here and everything, and our money is fine because not because they're federally backed, is because we have nothing to do with this single bank that is over there in California that is collapsing due to that error of them selling all those bonds and creating a havoc and a sort of panic for all their people that are banking with them.
They essentially caused what is called a run on the banks, and that's where you're seeing other banks go down. I think about 5, we were saying before, have gone down so far. And the problem with the local banks and even the bigger banks as well is just the simple and sheer panic of it all is what will cause it. You know, the normal the slightly more educated individual, say, who is able to at least see and know what's going on, isn't going to have the hindsight as Signature and SVB, and I don't remember exactly the other banks that went down. They're not gonna have the hindsight to be like, oh well my stuff's okay because it's a bank. They're gonna still go and they're gonna take things out. I'm not saying to be afraid or that anything is gonna happen, but I'm saying the run on the banks is very possible. And what you're saying actually is correct, Wyatt, that we shouldn't harbor such a level of concern or it will cause bigger problems. We can't tell everybody, you know, you should go get all your money out of the banks. You should have it all as hard cash because that will cause the problem. But at the same time, we can't advise people to just say, oh, keep it all in the banks. It's all right. You know, people can make their own decisions on that. It's a double-edged sword kind of deal. You got to be very careful how you kind of word it.
Right.
Yeah, you've got to be really careful. Just look at what happened to all the day trading earlier this week. They stopped trading on over 20 different, I believe it was over 20 different banking systems. You've had two of the largest banks in American history that just went under. They imploded. You have Credit Suisse in Switzerland or Europe, who is a huge credit loaner in Europe. They essentially went down until the Swiss came in there and said, hey, we are going to help you now. We're going to be giving you money because of this financial crisis that's getting ready to happen. You have all the normal people who are just seeing it, maybe just seeing, oh, stock day trading's going away. I need to go get my money out because I'm seeing all these banks just drop their values going down. I believe it was Signature Bank dropped 60% over the course of one day. But then there was a major rebound the following day. I think it was Tuesday where they had the major rebound where it went up over 20%.
Okay, I was gonna say, when I looked at it, it was an 8-point increase, which I think is like a 17% increase. So pretty rough.
Number one rule when you're
it ended up being about 20% and then dipped right back down again. They had to stop the trading to avoid the market going completely haywire from people buying and selling and having it fluctuate so rapidly.
Right. Number one rule, I mean, obviously whenever something crashes, you always want to buy. That's the time to buy for the little people, especially. I mean, for the people that got like hedge funds and everything like that, obviously they're not gonna participate in that much. But for the little people, that's the time to start buying, is when it starts going down, because you're buying it for pennies on the dollars on what it's normally worth, and now you're gonna see something eventually where it's gonna go back up. So
absolutely. And the people who are keeping their investments, you know, the likelihood, if we compared the 2008, is that they'll make back like 3 times the amount. I think it was people who held on to their investments in 2008 when things started to crash. They got back like threefold what it originally was. So there's some people are going to make a lot of money for it. And I should have thought of this. I should have invited my friend Clater on the talk, because Clater is a big investment guy. Kid's like not 16. Kid's like 19. He's nearly at $1 million. He's a very big day trader. I'm actually surprised I haven't thought of asking him about this until now. When Robot said day trading, it just made me think of it. He probably has a lot of stuff, but you know, in the past, he's not here now. But that would have been interesting.
But back to the banks. You know, I don't think people realize what a huge effect banking for America collapsing would be on not only the US but the world.
Well, I think they do. At this point, everybody's seen what happened, you know, the last time the Great Depression hit and, you know, banks collapsed. Black Friday and everything like that. Like that, it was massive. It would be near the same level.
Well, the thing is with the Great Depression is that back then, you know, a lot of people in a lot of different other countries, their currency was worth a little bit more because they didn't rely on the US as much. That's what happened with, you know, the US being in such a Great Depression. Now the world relies on the American dollar so much. That's why, you know, when we borrow money from ourselves and we're getting in these trillions of dollars in debt and everything, our dollar is still staying about the same currency because of the rest of the world. You know, other countries, they base their currency off of what our currency is. So, you know, like Mexico, what is it? A dollar is like, a dollar for us is like 50 pesos for them. Isn't it like half our dollar? Can't remember exactly.
It's a lot. I mean, in Venezuela, $100 is like, I think $100,000. It might not be exactly that, but it's something crazy like that, though.
I do know when I was over in Japan, when I was over at UDP, it was 100 yen was $1 for us in America. So, you know, a lot of people, they thrive off of what our banking is and everything. So, you know, starting with this panic with Silicon Valley would just trickle down. And like you said, Brandon, you know, a lot of people, if they start thinking and they're not actually doing their research, then, you know, that's when the bankings are going to have a lot of people start pulling money. You know, banks are going to be closing down. And that's when it creates the actual Great Depression for us, is when all these banks start closing row after row. And all of a sudden,
that's also not to say that it's a bad idea to pull your money out. You know, certainly isn't a bad idea. You know, it certainly wouldn't be a bad thing to have a buttload of cash out. You know, buy some chickens, get some land, as Tim Pool always says. You know, there'd be nothing wrong.
Kind of debatable.
Necessarily wrong with that, but you should still, you shouldn't pull all of your money out and, you know, hide it in your mattress, because, you know, we should still allow these banks to survive, because what happens if they all go down, which is unlikely, but, you know, theoretically, let's say it does happen, then you just have a federal banking system or whatever that they're gonna make. You know, it's obvious what they do. And it would just not end well.
Well, the thing is, I would not suggest to anyone right now to go into the bank and pull out any money, because even if you pull out just raw cash, if you don't do anything with it and you shove it on your mattress, guess what's going to happen to that? First off, first off, the banks are going to crash even more because everybody's pulling out money, which is what happened in the Great Depression. And then second off, that cash that you have tucked away, they're going to have to start printing, and inflation is going to go up massively.
Yep.
That's the only way that they counteract that. And that cash that you have tucked away is going to be worth nothing if it keeps doing what it's doing and people keep pulling out money. You are insured up to $250,000 by the federal bank. You can leave your money in there, and as long as you leave it in there, and the federal government isn't a dumbass like Biden was when he bailed out Silicon and these other banks that he's bailed out trying to stem the flow, as long as they don't do shit like that, the little guy who has less than $250,000 sitting in a bank, you're fine. Your money's not going to go anywhere. You're okay. And that's why the FDIC is a thing. That's why we have federally insured banks. Like, that's the entire purpose behind it.
If you allow that to keep going, yes, you can leave your money in the bank. I'm not saying that people need to go out and just withdraw it and just sit on it.
If you're going to withdraw it, put it into money investments. Put it into things like property, gold, things that are not going to devalue.
That's gold. Always do gold.
Always
from bullion max.
Or silver. Silver holds its own as well.
Yeah, any of those precious metals and guns,
If you do pull your money out, though, out of the banking, the wisest investment for you to do is a lot of, like Brendan was saying, like, you don't have to buy land and chickens and everything like that. But if you do stock up like a little bit, gallons of water or, stuff you can put away. So if something ever does happen, your family's okay for like a month, then in that same instance, you would be protecting yourself with your money because you're actually putting it forward to something that you actually need and it's not a want.
I'd say property is a good investment. Very good investment.
Property is always a good investment. I mean, right now it's kind of a very good investment. Right now it's kind of debatable. You'll probably see a long-term return, like in the next 10 years, maybe 5. But the housing market is currently like in a nosedive. It is not a seller's market. It is a buyer's market.
I'm looking for a house. I know.
Yeah. But I mean,
property is never a bad investment for a couple of years now because when I bought my house last year, it was still up from, it's been going on for about 2 years now with this whole market. And, it's starting to go down just because people don't want to pay these outrageous prices for these houses. Somebody's selling. I saw a house that was for sale down the road. Somebody's selling a 3-bedroom ranch style house for almost $400,000. I mean, it's ridiculous. People don't want to buy that because you're making us pay money like it's monopoly money at that point.
You live in a nice area, but not that nice.
I do.
Well, the issue is
I bought mine for $320,000.
That's good. That makes sense.
The issue is after the whole COVID thing, where it did become very much a seller's market for like a year or two there. Same thing with the cars, and it's kind of the same situation because I'm trying to sell a car currently, and it's very much a buyer's market rather than a seller's market because there was that influx of everybody got their cash. Everybody's like, what am I going to do with this? Well, let me go buy a house. Let me go buy a car because I need these things or I want these things and I have the money to do this. And so it became very much a seller's market. People were making all kinds of money off of it. And then like 2021-ish is when that shift happened, late 2021, early 2022. And it became very much a buyer's market, but people were still wanting to price things at the same prices that they saw people selling before because they thought, well, why can't I get this? Why can't I get this? And then now it's becoming a case of, well, we had, how long a year of crazy high gas prices, which affected everything, higher inflation, all of these factors. And people are like, well, now I need this much more because my standard of living is costing me more and I need this to make up the difference.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, just the thing with the banks too, with simple loans for houses is just atrocious because, somebody will say at the bank, hey, you can't afford this loan. That's, you get one for a house, right? And it's a $2,000 payment a month for this house loan that you want to get from a bank. The bank says, hey, you can't afford it. But yet at the same time, you're going to live in an apartment that you're paying $1,800 for. And you're like, man, I'm just throwing my money away at this point. And the bank's not even going to back me up because I don't have a 750 credit score.
You will own nothing and you will be happy.
To own property.
I know.
They want you to own anything.
No, not at all.
You will own nothing and you will be happy.
Yeah. So, I mean, the banking with it could be better. For especially people, because a lot of these older people that own the majority of the houses in the U.S., You have the millennials coming through, and probably like half of the houses are owned by millennials now. But the Gen Z people, they're trying to come through and buy houses through the bank and everything. But what Trevor was saying, it's a buyer's market right now, but they're all fighting for bidding prices on all these houses along the way. So somebody could sell a house for just put a number on it, 360,000, right? So that person says that they want to sell that house for 360,000. Another person comes in and they give an above estimate of about $10,000 or more. So now it's at 370,000. Then you start what's called this bidding war. So it's just going up and up and up and up. Before long, that's when that house is at 400,000 that I was talking about earlier, because those people have bidded that up so much because people want to buy those houses so bad. And then they get to talking to their bank and they're like, hey, can I afford this? The bank says, nope, can't afford it.
Bank says, LOL, no.
Yeah, good bid, but nope, not for you.
Not for you. You don't get to have it.
Yeah, so live in your apartment that's $1,800 a month.
But that's more than a mortgage would be. Don't care. Didn't ask.
Yeah, didn't care. Yeah, your credit score is not good enough. Sorry, big dog.
Oh my gosh, dude. A little bit off topic, but on topic of credit is ridiculous. And I don't remember who I saw compared it to social credit score recently, and I was like, that rings so true. Like I got into a car accident, a really bad car accident last year. My credit score tanked because I simultaneously paid off the other car, then bought a new one at the same time, essentially. So it dropped like 100 points, and I was like, oh no.
Dude, but the thing is because I'll let you guys know, I had a really bad credit score probably about 3 years ago, right? But that was from, I was in the military. I wasn't really paying the bills like I should have. I was just more partying than anything, so I didn't really care. But when I started getting out and I met my wife, we wanted to buy all these nice things, but we couldn't really go off my credit score because I needed to build it up. People don't realize that you can actually build your credit score up through the bank actually in about 6 to 7 months. I was sitting at around, I think like 610, 620. It was horrible.
Holy shit.
Yeah, dude, it was bad. But I'm going to tell you right now, within, probably a year, I built that up to a 700 because I paid off all these things that I needed to. And, there's things that you can do through the banking too. If your spouse or significant other has a better credit score, they can actually sign you on to their credit cards to take on their payments. And if they have really good credit history, it'll actually bump up your credit score. So we did that a little bit. I built up about 100 points in a year, which is amazing if you know what you're doing. But I kind of had a good thing going because my wife works for a bank, so she knew what she was doing. Yeah,
do it.
Yeah,
that's crazy. I've had a credit card since I was 18, and I've been using it consistently, so I've never had bad credit. I mean, even when I dropped 100 there, I didn't really have bad credit. I just had mediocre credit, and I was like, I need great credit again, not mediocre credit.
And that's the thing with capitalism in America, right? So all banks, everybody pretty much, they will look at your credit score. I mean, there's even some apartments that you'll go to that they'll even sometimes ask for your credit score to make sure that you can make payments on time. So credit score is actually really beneficial through the banks that in order to really survive nowadays. And so if you don't have a good credit score, then, I mean, you're doing it wrong, first off. But there is easy ways to fix it. You can fix it along the way. But, it's all about taking time. It's not going to happen overnight, but, it is doable.
I would say, I mean, I don't, while I make an effort to have a good credit score, I don't think credit is a good thing. The way it really works, I think it's I don't think it's a good thing, just to put it simply. I mean, but you are right that as it stands, you do kind of need to have a good credit score. Like I work with this one older guy who has no credit card, and it works for him because he's life and he's 60. So at this point, it doesn't even matter. But
Yeah,
and like someone my age or your age or anything like that, we going anywhere. Either that or we better have a lot of cash somehow.
Right, yeah. Cash is essential too if you don't have a good credit score.
And the funny thing is, if you have a lot of cash, you have a good credit score. Like that's what.
Yeah, I mean,
my dad was like, my dad had a shit credit score, like because he didn't pay some stuff off, but he had he started making a lot of money, and he didn't even use credit cards or anything. They literally saw that he had like over $1 million in the bank, and they're like, "Yeah, you have good credit now." And it's just like that's how it is. You know, if they see that you have money and you can pay shit off, they're like, "Okay, well, we liked you now. We want your money."
Yeah, that's another thing with it too. If you do have a lot of money, they don't really care about your credit score because they're like, well, this guy's got $1 million in the damn bank, so yeah, we can give him this loan.
Yeah, who cares about your credit score? $1 million.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, yeah, if you know, but it is hard to make. Actually, it's not that hard to make that amount of money nowadays. You know, with people going to college, honestly, that's not even the way to go anymore. You know how back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, you know, people were telling you to go to college. If you don't go to college, you're not doing anything with your life. But the thing is now, so many people were told to go to college along the way that the blue collar jobs, the blue collar jobs, that's what's essentially keeping America alive. So those blue collar jobs are paying 3 times as more as somebody that got a stupid degree in gender studies, right? You know, those gender studies people, you know, they're owing $60,000 to $70,000 now, but the person that went to a blue collar job, he's getting paid $40 an hour to go be a lineman, or $50 an hour, and he's not in debt. He's driving around a really good truck. He just bought a house. He's got a great family going. He started his life way before somebody could even start theirs because they've been in college the whole time, partying most likely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean that's a whole other conversation. Not to go too far into it because I think it'd be more suitable starting topic is for it. But
you can do a whole segment after that.
Funneling people through college has a problem to reach to, but that's a whole other issue. It's so.
I was just trying to point that.
I get what you're saying. I'm just saying to go to. I'm for myself mostly. I don't want to go into it now because it's definitely a better time to go into it. I mean, I'd say at this point, I think we've gotten a point with the bank itself. I think we can kind of move on to our next topic with that the Russian plane that clipped into one of our drones over the Black Sea. Mm-hmm. If you ask me, everyone's like screaming it's an act of aggression because everyone's warm up in their own right now. I'd call it more an act of defense. I mean, it's probably the same drone that gave the Ukrainians a targeting position for warship in the Black Sea. So, I mean, can we really call it an act of aggression? It's more an act of defense, if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree completely. And the funny thing is, we're making a whole big fuss about it. And sorry, apologies for the dogs, but we're making a whole big fuss about it because, you know, it's our drone and you can't do that to us, even though we know that we're feeding information to the Ukrainians. And, you know, they've declared that as a war zone and a no-fly airspace for, you know, international flights. But
real quick, just so you know, we're a little blurry on the stream. But anyway, go on. I just thought of it.
Yeah, it's just probably just bit rate.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's just funny because we like to be the person that, and I think I've said this before, basically says, you can't mess with us, but we're going to poke you in the face as much as we want and just mess with you all the time. Like, this was coming. I'm surprised that they didn't shoot it down, and them not blatantly just shooting it down and kind of like, you know, they've risked a fighter, which I think is kind of funny, but when you look at the cost, and I did this earlier, they're pretty much the same, which is the funny thing. But
I think it's like a call your bluff type of deal, if you ask me. Like, you know, hey, we clipped into your plane. It was an accident. Call my bluff. Tell me I did it on purpose. Be the warmonger, America.
I don't think people realize how much those drones are.
I also believe that they are trying to recover the downed drone now. trying to see what kind of technology that they can get out of it and see what kind of information gathering that we were sending back over to the Ukrainians, if they're able to get that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Trevor said, I mean, the cost is almost identical. But the difference is that the Russians, they can mass produce those Su-27s. The drones take us a little bit more time to build on our side of it, just because it's unmanned.
I think what Trevor was saying is the cost of like shooting it down and the cost of crashing the plane into it are roughly.
Yeah, well, what I meant, the cost of the actual physical plane and the cost of the MQ-9 Reaper are actually very, very similar. They're almost equivalent. But like, if you think about, okay, well, do we want to risk ramming a jet into this thing versus, just spending maybe a couple $100 and 30 mic? I know which one that I would lean towards, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of curious, like what the actual response is going to be from Biden. Maybe if he's going to treat it as a true act of aggression, if he's going to just ignore it.
It's going to be harsh words and increased, sanctions and increased aid towards Ukraine, which is nothing surprising. That's why they released the video. To kind of justify that and be like, look, this was intentional, which I think it is good that they released the video. I think it's funny that they like to release videos for certain things and, not for others. It's like whatever works in their favor, but that's another topic. But it is good that they released the video. You can see in the video, it's a very blatant that the jet is flying very dangerously close to this thing and dumping fuel, which is funny. But yeah, I mean, it's very blatant.
So I don't think anything is going to really come of it. I know everyone keeps saying it's escalation, but that when you have the top brass, General Milley saying that incidents happen, and I'm using an actual quote, incidents happen. You can read that on the Daily Wire. He's not seeing it as an act of aggression. He's just seeing it as
an accident.
Yeah, as even though they were harassing our drone, trying to basically shoo us away from the area, which you are correct. Yeah, Brandon, I'm going to say that it was strictly defensive based, trying to defend their key positions, trying to keep their soldiers alive and keep them keep them in the fight longer. And it was strictly defensive. And if the U.S. keeps trying to push this, Russia's just going to keep calling our bluff.
But the Russians, at the same time, they don't have really a lot to throw back at. I mean, they're in the same category as if they're doing this chicken fight, pretty much, where they're trying to call our bluff. I mean, they've lost twice as many Russian aircraft as the Soviet Union lost during the 10-year war in Afghanistan. I don't know if you guys ever read The Bear Goes Over the Mountain. Are you guys familiar with that?
I am not.
I'm not, no.
So The Bear Goes Over the Mountain, this is before our time in Afghanistan. Bear Goes Over the Mountain in Afghanistan. Basically, the Russians invaded Afghanistan a couple years before we set boots down on, since 9/11 and everything that happened. They were fighting over there, and there was a historic battle that was pretty much the losing point for Russians. And it's called Bear Goes Over the Mountain, and it's basically a big convoy of this mountain pass that these Afghanistan fighters set up, and they destroyed, all these aircraft, helicopters, tanks, BMPs, everything, and did a detrimental loss to Russia, where Russia kind of backed off from it. Well, the Ukraine war, they've lost twice as many. I mean, they've lost so far, and this was according to Forbes, 55 Russian fighters and 54 helicopters have been lost since February of this year. So, I mean, it's total, I think they said it's about 300 aircraft so far have done it. So, I get that you're saying the bluff to kind of give them defensive positions to help their troops down below, but they don't really, they kind of have a bluff too, because they can't really afford to lose that many more fighters. They don't have a big as air force as we do, or Europe does, or anything like that, and they're trying to hold on as well.
This is them kind of calling the U.S. on its threats for a Ukraine no-fly zone, which we've kind of been hinting at. And this is basically them saying, well, if you give us a no-fly zone, we're giving you a no-fly zone. And it's going to be all-out war.
But at the same time, I
I don't see it happening.
It is,
but they're definitely hinting towards that, and that's what it is. Is basically you have to derive the purpose of what this was for. Obviously, it was defensive. They're trying to get this thing out of their airspace, and it's watching their troop movements blatantly. It's watching their troop movements, but they're also hinting at that idea of this is our no-fly zone. Okay, if you want to play this game of no-fly zones, this is ours, and we're going to take out anything over here.
Yeah. I agree. And I mean, did you guys see that Biden did go visit Ukraine this month? Or it was last month. It was last month, sorry.
He went
there during the Palestine issue.
Yeah. But I mean, even that in itself has got to be a kick in the neck for the Russians, because not only are you giving direct support to the Ukraine force, but now you're actually going into the country with your leader, and you're on the ground while we've surrounded most of your territories. And now if something happens where, nobody really likes Biden, it's whatever, however you feel about him. But at the same time, if something did happen, they know that it would kick off a war immediately, because no matter if you don't like him, if you like him, he's still the president right now. So there would be some kind of retaliation for it. And I don't think they want to do that. But if push comes to shove, they would do something.
Well, they hadn't been hitting Kiev anyways. Like, he went when it was safest. They haven't been hitting Kiev with anything for a hot minute, as far as I know. I think that they did like a small limited attacks, but most of it's been focused on the front line, because there's they're having to divert everything to the front line, and they're issuing ammunition shortages and, rationing ammunition, because it's bad. And I mean, we're kind of at that point too, where we're having to really shift things around because we've been funding this war so much. I mean, it's very blatant, and I want to be frank. I do not think that without Western support, Ukraine would have lasted nearly as long as it has, because it would have been a war of attrition, and they wouldn't have had the supplies. Yeah, as simple as that. They wouldn't have had the guns to fire it, and they're still running out of ammo as is. They would have ran out, 6 months ago. And it's kind of like showing the reality of what modern warfare is.
That the world has given them.
Well, yeah, and the training.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an immense level of
training right now.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, I think we've all been on that same stance for the past several episodes. Every time we bring up Ukraine, it's all NATO is the lifeline to Ukraine right now. Without NATO, Ukraine would have lost long before now.
Yeah, Ukraine's in a freaking coma, and NATO is the saline bag that's attached to that.
Yeah, so they're basically keeping them alive right now with it.
It's kind of sad.
Russia knows that.
Honestly, it's kind of sad though, because how many more people are dying because we're prolonging this war? I mean, that's one way of looking at it, and it's like, I'm not saying that Russia should win this. This shouldn't have been a war in the first place, but it's almost, irrefutable, unless they're going to commit mass genocides when they take over the land, that if, one side or the other won, not saying which one, but if one side or the other won, it would save a lot more lives than continuing this war.
I mean, we can say that about every war, though.
I mean,
we should have
absolutely
World War II. We should have stopped the Cold War. We should have stopped.
I would argue against World War II because they were committing mass genocides, and that's where it was right that we went in there.
Well, yeah, I mean that, but I mean at the same time, in one side, it's just the same kind of situation where Russia was coming in and they were dropping bombs on civilian cities and stuff instead of focusing on actual Ukraine military assets. And I think if they would have focused more on Ukraine military assets, I think this wouldn't have lasted as long.
I agree, it would have been different. It's just they have very different tactics than the West, but we've also had the chance to refine our tactics against guerrilla warfare, which this is essentially a lot more. I mean, it's been evident they had a little bit of training in Syria and Afghanistan, but they don't have near the level, and that's why we have so many precision weapons, and it's being, evidenced just how effective precision weapons are in, modern warfare, and they're kind of realizing that. I think that this is a great, learning opportunity for the Russian military, Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for us, who knows? I'd say it's a bad thing, but they're definitely going to learn from this and take a lot out of it.
It's definitely the first war in a long time that somebody has fought against a regulated army. You know, even though Ukraine has a lot of volunteer force, they still are doing sort of a regulated military on both sides, right?
Yeah, it's much more of a conventional war.
Right, conventional war. That's what I was trying to think of.
It's this weird mix of conventional and guerrilla warfare, and I think that's what's...
Yeah, it's like the front lines are a screen of guerrilla warfare, and they're getting information from basically quote-unquote insurgents, which are just, civilians there that are sympathetic to the Ukrainians, and they're feeding them information. But there is definitely a defense in depth and, those elements of conventional warfare where you have artillery in the back line, anti-air elements and all that. So it's interesting to see it.
What were you going to say, Wyatt?
Me?
Yeah, well, you were going to say something before I started talking.
Oh, I was just going to say that it was it's been a conventional warfare, and I agree with Trevor since almost World War II. Look at all the other wars. The French were in Vietnam before us, and then, they pulled out, but they were fighting against, it wasn't really the NVA that they were fighting against. It was more of just Viet Cong who were fighting against. I mean, the Korean War, yes, we were going against Chinese troops and mass divisions.
Yeah, Korea is like the last one that had more conventional.
Yeah, I would say Korea is the last one for sure.
Well, actually, I'd argue Gulf Storm. That was probably the last one. Fighting Iran.
I don't know though. Because
Saddam, correct?
Yeah, that was against Saddam and the Iraqi army. I don't know though, because within a day we decimated their air force, ruled the skies. And within that war lasted well under 6 to 5 months.
Oh no, absolutely. But it was a conventional war. It was a conventional war where we were basically the big bullies of it, and we had way more firepower and all that. But it was a conventional war.
It was, yeah. No, I agree, and it all goes down to doing the Gulf War that we were just talking about. It all comes down to with the Russian jet and the drone that we're speaking about, is that if you rule the skies, you can still have another outcome for a war.
Absolutely.
And the air superiority is a very real thing. Superiority. I can't even speak sometimes. Jeez.
It's okay. We know you're a caveman.
No, but I don't blame Russia for downing this drone. I don't think that anybody can say that was escalating anything. It was kind of escalatory for us to have it there. If we have it there, expect it to get smacked. It's like if you fuck around with something, you're gonna find out.
Like some people are saying we have every right to be there. Well, technically, it was over international. The part of the Black Sea was over was technically international. But what people keep forgetting is that that's probably the same drone that sent the Ukrainians the targeting information for their warship that was in the Black Sea, their home ship or whatever.
The flagship.
Flagship, that's what the word is. And whether or not it was that drone, we're clearly giving targeting information to Ukrainians in the Black Sea. So we essentially are part of this. There was nothing escalating about that. That was defense. That's just all it was. I don't mean to go and defend their actions because they're doing terrible things. Granted, so are the Ukrainians, but that's what it was. We still have to say it for what it is.
Yeah, and they declared it a hazardous airspace, at least for civilian flights, forever ago, like last year. And that's why you haven't seen any civilian air flights over that area. I think that they've said more about it, but I can't confirm that. I haven't seen it anywhere. And they've also, Turkey declared a no-sail zone getting out of the Black Sea. So, I mean, first of all, they're trapped. So that they have every right to kind of defend their quote-unquote airspace, even though it isn't, nationally recognized or internationally recognized as their airspace. It's recognized as, that's a war zone. Don't fly shit over there if you don't want it to get fucked with. And we would be doing the exact same thing if the Russians were flying, a drone near a country we were actively at war with.
Oh, 100%. But I am glad that it was an unmanned drone.
I think that they did that intentionally.
That goes without saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't think that they would have done if it was AWACS or something, a manned AWACS.
Right, and if it was one of our F-18s, F-22s, anyone like that, because we do patrols in that area with our fleets, and every fleet's got a couple carriers with it. But if that would have been turntables and it wasn't a drone, and they would have created more threats and tried to potentially shoot down, we would have probably been in this war this week.
And I think it just goes to show
I don't think you can say that we're not in this war. We are all but
we're a financial benefactor.
I'm saying if that would have happened, we would have been boots on the ground.
Yeah, he's talking about a ground war. I get what you're.
Well, I mean, if they fired at an F-18, the F-18 would have been returning fire immediately.
Yeah.
Like that's rules of engagement right there.
Yeah. So, and it is what it is, and. I hope we can learn from this and not fly that close anymore, because we are sticking our necks out a little bit more than a lot of other countries are. And I believe that, like you said earlier, NATO is essentially right now just the U.S. sending most of it. The other countries are sending little bits at a time, but not nearly as much as the U.S. And if the U.S. wasn't involved with NATO, like you said earlier, I think this would have been a very, very short conflict, and I don't think it would have lasted as long.
A side note, I didn't see anywhere where they said explicitly, maybe I just missed it, but was the drone armed? Because I know MQ-9s can be armed.
I've never seen anything about it being armed or not.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting thing to know, if it was armed and was capable of firing back at the aircraft that were harassing it.
The picture of it. Look at it again. Is that the?
I don't think that's exact. I think that's just a.
Okay.
That's a static display. What they consider a static display. They'll take pictures of they'll go in and they'll have air shows and everything. So what they'll do is they'll set up all that static display with any arms or ammunition, and they'll let the public come in and kind of look at stuff with everything closed out.
Yeah, I just know that I don't know if the Reaper can mount AIM-9s. I imagine it can. It can mount anything else.
If you look at that picture right there, look in the bottom left where that.
I know these are mounts. I just don't know if they can mount and it has the control systems for like an AIM-9X or an AIM-120.
Those are
why it did, weren't you? Didn't you arm the jets? Isn't that what you did?
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to touch on right now. Those carriers right there, that's called a LAU 127. It's a loaded arm unit. So basically, what that can carry is what's called an AIM 120 and a AIM 9 and AIM 7X. So basically those are what you take basically the missile, right, in a 3-man crew, and you slide that to the back where it locks into place, and the missile will have a locking mechanism on the back where you can arm and dearm. So those carriers right there, those LAU 127s, those are specifically made for air-to-air combat and shooting down aircraft and everything. Now, you can put the AIM 120s on there. The AIM 120s are used mostly for ground forces, tanks, vehicles, anything like that, anything large. The AIM 120s lock onto radiation. The AIM 7 and AIM 9X, those are actually against other aircraft. They lock onto, every jet has a radiation package in the front of it. So what that missile does is it locks onto the radiation package. Don't know if I should be telling this, but I'm out of the military. Don't give a fuck.
I'm sure it's fine.
I'm sure it's fine. They lock onto the radiation packages in the front of the aircraft, which the radiation package is used for their navigation and their actual arming techniques as well. So that is how those missiles lock on to jets in the air. So that setup right there, that is set up for air-to-air defense.
I would be curious to know then if it was armed or if it was an unarmed drone.
Okay, so from the Washington Post 2 days ago, the day it happened, Pentagon spokesman, Air Force Brigadier General Patrick Ryder told reporters that the 2 Russian Su-27s were first seen in the vicinity of the MQ-9 about 30 to 40 minutes before the American pilots brought it down. He declined to say whether the drone was armed and what the mission was.
That's interesting that they declined to say. I think that speaks volumes.
You look at that, if you look at that article though on the Daily Wire, it does specifically say the Su-27 aircraft struck the propeller of the $32 million unmanned MQ-9 Reaper drone. So that's what that's saying right there. But like you said,
it doesn't say unarmed or anything.
Sure.
It just says unmanned. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, that's the only thing that it goes into.
We'll never know, but we can imply.
Yeah, the fact that they declined to comment that it was unarmed says a lot. That's all I'm saying. I think that it probably was.
I certainly agree.
I mean, that's pure speculation, but
most of the drones, if they're doing surveillance, if you look in the front of that drone,
right here, that's
other people look at it. Yeah, that is called a lightning pod. Now, the lightning pods actually are what you can zoom in and how they see with the camera on flying and everything. They can zoom in, up to 300 miles down, and they can actually see a pretty clear picture with thermo, with anything that they want to be able to visually see.
And
so that's what most surveillance are. Yeah.
Drones are cool as shit. Anyway, though, I think we've made our point.
Yep.
I think we've made quite a lot of progress here. Does anyone have any final words of encouragement? Lovely.
I'm going to say the same thing I said last time. Don't get blackpilled. Don't be blackpilled. There is hope. As much as things look dark right now, there's always hope for the future.
I would be inclined to agree.
Timelapse, do you have Wyatt? Do you have a quote for us this week?
Absolutely. I'm already loaded with quotes. This one comes straight from what I imagine is probably top 10 of my favorite presidents. Franklin D. Roosevelt. He said, "When you reach the end of your rope, tie a knot in it and hang on."
Well, that's lovely to hear. Anyway, everybody, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We are really trying to get our voices out there. I appreciate you all listening, and we'll talk to you later.
Talk to you next.